Labor and Tim Wilson, a Liberal MP as well. Thanks both for your time today, and I might start on this reshuffle with you, Tim Wilson. All the reports are it's going to be a pretty minimal one. That would make sense given some of the ministers that could possibly go into health are just getting their feet under the desk, if you like, of the portfolios they got into post-July.
Well, obviously it's up to the Prime Minister to make that decision, but if I were to offer any advice to him, I would recommend something minimalist because precisely the reasons you outlined. Ministers have only been in the job if they've been appointed since the last election for 6 months. There needs to be stability, predictability and implementation of policy. I would have thought anything beyond that would just create instability in the broader sense of policy direction. And so simple, predictable, lining up the ducks so that we can get on with the job is where the focus of the government should be at.
We'll see someone go up into the cabinet, obviously, and that will create a spot in the Outer Ministry. Putting your hand up, Tim Wilson, ready to serve?
Of course, I'm happy to serve. Let's not try and pretend otherwise, but I'm not expecting to serve, Tom. I'm quite happy representing the people of Goldstein.
Fair enough. Amanda Richworth, I'm not going to ask you about the reshuffle because it's probably not something that you'll have a lot of say in, I dare say. But let's get to this issue that started all of this, the entitlements. I'm interested in your view because obviously we've got changes that are afoot. But broadly speaking, there's been a lot of talk that perhaps ministers won't be able to get flown to, for example, claim flights to sporting events as one really big obvious example, unless they are the sports minister. Where do you stand on that?
Well, first I would say I, assumed Tim was putting his hand up, but when it comes to the entitlements, I think the move towards, at which the review into MPs' travel entitlements said, is we need to move to a work-related expense system, one that really recognises that if you travel as an MP, and I must say it is, as a minister and MP, important to travel around the country to consult with people in rural and regional communities, not just in the major cities, but it must be linked to work-related expenses, and I think that's where the key is. More transparency around this, I think, is critically important. That's why we've given, in principle, support to the government's announcement. But I would say there has been a review sitting on the table.
Just on the specific, if I can get it though, Amanda Richworth, so that example, because there's a lot of examples of ministers flying to sporting events when they're not the sports minister. The counter-argument is, well, if you make, for example, a corporate not only give the ticket to a minister but also fly them for several $1,000s, they're more likely, perhaps, to have some sort of, feeling that they owe them a favour. So do you think that they should be able to claim for flights, as an example, to sporting events when you're not the sports minister?
Well, I think you have to justify what your work-related activity was there. I think that's the critical point. I think there might be instances where you travel interstate and you can clearly demonstrate that this was work-related. There are other instances where that can't be clearly justified. I think the key is here the term work-related expenses, and I think if you can demonstrate that you are working and it's of value to the taxpayer, then obviously that is the critical test that must be achieved. And I think therefore the change from, I guess, the sense of entitlement system to a work-related expense system, which was recommended by the review over 12 months ago, is the critical test to this.
Tim Wilson, you came into this role not so long ago. How did you find coming in and just how clear all the rules were around expenses? And to that point, if you're heading off to a sporting event, is it the sort of thing you think twice about? You think you will claim, you won't claim?
Well, that's one of the beautiful things about being a member from the great state of Victoria. We are the arts and sports capital, so everywhere is a short drive. So I'll never have to face this dilemma, unless my mighty Melbourne Demons are paying interstate and I'm invited. The short answer, Tom, is it's an incredibly opaque system because it has to be, because it comes down to individual members of Parliament's judgment. The problem is when people make misjudgments, it affects all of us because the reputation is dispersed across every member of Parliament. in practice, you should do things that are based on work-related expenses, as Amanda has outlined, as has been recommended by the Condi Review, but you have to exercise a certain amount of judgment in everything you do. But part of the challenge is how, frankly, the media represents things. You know, if I have a day-long of meetings that was always going to occur in Sydney, and then later in the day I happen to go to, let's take sports out of it, I'm more of an arts fan than a sports fan, and I get invited to an arts event, is it inappropriate now for me to go to the arts event later in that evening if I was already going to stay over for meetings the next day, if the media are just going to turn around and say, I flew to Sydney for an arts event, which is a blatant and a complete lie? That's the reality. When I go to other states, I wait until I have a whole set of meetings and have them in one instance for very specific reasons, because I actually don't have time to fly around the country jetting around just for individual events. It has to be condensed to be efficient as well as being cost effective for the taxpayer. So at some point, judgment needs to be exercised, but sometimes the media needs to exercise a bit of judgment and recognise that we have multiple aspects to our role, and not all parts of our job have to be dull or boring or serious to be part of our work.
Yeah, and I know you've got, for example, family reunion, where it makes sense that if you're going to catch up with a spouse or partner and they're going to Cairns and Hobart in the month, if I were in that situation, I'd probably go to Cairns as well. But what about what Barry O'Sullivan has said, Tim Wilson, you know, did the government learn quickly enough from what happened with the Bronwyn Bishop fallout? And one particular thing I'll put to you, because this is a recommendation not yet implemented, the family reunion flight, switching them from business to economy. I mean, the argument as a politician is you do business, your family's not doing business on a 2-hour trip to come and meet you, and that can mean the difference between, you know, $1,000 return airfare and $5,000.
In short, I agree with that principle of making them economy-based. But I think we've got to look at it as part of the broader package. The government did respond quickly after the Bronwyn Bishop affair. That's why there was the review, and that's why we're not talking about whether we're going to have a review about potential reforms of the system. We're talking about what the recommendation from the inquiry to reform the system has put forward, and that's what's now being considered. But you know, in broad principle, I've got to say I'm actually not a big fan of the family reunion component, apart from your capital city or your home city to Canberra, because in the end, most of the work, I understand why sometimes people need to fly their family to official business in Canberra, but I think we should be very cautious about doing so when it's done to other capital cities or other places, particularly if it's anything for any other reason than for a considerable stay of time.
What do you think of that, Amanda Rishworth? That's Tim Wilson basically saying he'd be willing to see this reform go even further than the Condi Review. Is that something you'd be willing to consider?
Oh, well, look, obviously, the Labor has said we'll work with the whole Parliament to have a look at this whole process. I mean, I would say Tim suggested that the government reacted very quickly to that. I'm not sure a review gathering dust until the Susan Ley incident occurred was really fast action. Indeed, this has been 12 months sitting there waiting for some action from the government. But when it comes to family reunion, there are certain circumstances in which it is appropriate, but it needs to be very, very clear. The rules are actually quite clear around family reunion. There's certain circumstances, such as breastfeeding mothers, for example. There was one recommendation about supporting breastfeeding members of Parliament to actually have support to continue doing that, because the work doesn't stop. So there's certain circumstances in which need to be carefully looked at, but it shouldn't be about family members having a holiday.
Tim Wilson has mentioned that there was a major review. I know you're saying that it's gathering a bit of dust, Amanda Rishworth, but at the same time, this was really a wholesale look at the system. Yes, recommendations, not many implemented so far, but it's certainly a lot more wholesale than anything Labor put pen to paper on during its last time in office.
Well, that's not true. We made significant reforms, including abolishing the study leave, which there's been some controversy about. There is no longer a study leave available to MPs. So I wouldn't say there haven't been reforms that Labor indeed made in government. It seems though it has taken the Susan Ley incident to actually prompt the government to do something about it. But of course, in that instance, we haven't even seen the report that was commissioned by the Prime Minister. Talks a lot about transparency, and I agree with him that transparency is key, but he certainly hasn't released the report into Susan Ley, so we're not entirely sure what that report says.
We're going to take a quick break on AIM Agenda. Back with more after the break, including Tony Abbott's latest contribution to the policy discussion. Stay with us.
There is a place where accommodation, dining, kids' clubs and entertainment are all included. And you can reserve your cruise for just $1. But it's like no place on Earth.
Dude, look at the traffic.
Chicanas, bring on the tops.
Andrew, this house, the kids' education, our holidays, you know we couldn't afford any of it if something happened to one of us, right?
Oh, come on, Emma. Do we really need to talk about it right now? I mean, couldn't wait till we come back?
No. We've been putting it off for far too long already. Here, take a look. There's one simple thing that we can do right now that will protect everything that's important to us.
Well, what's that?
Get real life insurance.
What, right now before we go?
Yes, right now. You know, it won't take long and then I can relax and enjoy the holiday.
All right. Let's do it.
Applying for real life insurance is easy. Take Emma, for example. She decided this cover is simply too important to put off any longer. So I helped her organise it right then and there. Just like Emma, you can apply for real life insurance quickly and easily over the phone because there's no need for a medical or a blood test. You simply choose the cover amount you'd like your family to receive, which can be from $100,000 up to $1 million. And this is paid quickly to your loved ones when they need it most. You'll also get back 10% of the premiums you've paid after the first 12 months with the real reward. Plus, for a limited time, when you take out cover today, you could get a bonus $100 gift card. Taking out real life insurance is one simple thing you can do right now to take what matters most to you. For a quick quote, call 139 939 or search Real Life Insurance now.
Time to find your ideal hotel. Ready? Type in where you want to go. With 2 clicks, select your check-in and check-out dates and search Hotel Trivago.
The King Living summer sale ends soon with up to 50% off selected designs. Discover the versatile Delta Metro. Packages from only $19.95. Visit a King Living showroom today. Sale ends soon.
After a year of talking culinary conquests, Mark is put to the test.
Ah, here he is.
What's that? What's that smell?
No, there's no smell.
Don't open it! Don't open it! Oh.
And just like our show, I've done all the hard work and you turn up for the limelight. There we go, there's your pasta. Better than anything you'll find down at 2GB. Doris the tea lady's been making your scones sans sultanas.
So will you be back this year? That's the big question.
Welcome back to AIM Agenda, talking through the day's issues. I've got Labor frontbencher Amanda Rishworth and also Liberal MP Tim Wilson. And Tim Wilson, Tony Abbott put pen to paper over the weekend. It was ostensibly an article about what to do in the wake of Donald Trump, but also had some very specific advice that the government should scrap the renewable energy target. Where does this rank on the scale of helpful to undermining?
Well, I'd be hypocritical of somebody who likes to proffer their opinion from time to time to condemn or to criticise a colleague of mine who also wishes to offer their opinion from time to time. But when it comes down to it, the government's energy policy is actually quite clear, was developed under the Abbott government, is continuing to be implemented under the Turnbull government, is actually trying to manage the tension that exists between trying to make sure that we keep household energy prices low while also delivering a secure investment environment for people to actually invest in energy in Australia. And so I would have thought that we want to keep our focus there. You know, I'm not somebody who believes we should have unlimited subsidies for renewable energy. I believe that we should be having a sustainable, secure and cost-effective energy supply, but that doesn't happen by having one policy change, another policy change, another policy change, because then you get no investment in the sector. So I would have thought staying the course while finding ways to take sensible, measured approach to get investment in the types of energy we actually need would be the better solution to the problem.
Tony Abbott's certainly a lot less tempered now that he's not Prime Minister, and it was fascinating to read this. I mean, at one stage he was talking about Australia having a big reserve of clean coal. I just don't think that's actually true at all, Tim Wilson. Is it fair to say you think he's, you know, being as ideological as he wants now?
I don't recall that statement, but you know, people always have views about what they think should happen in the future of the country. I do as well. I just haven't had the opportunity to serve in high office, and so to be judged against my record. But when it comes down to it, we need secure investment supply in this country, particularly in the energy sector, if we want to make sure we can deliver cheap energy at stable and secure prices so that people can get on with their lives. And that doesn't come from constant shifts in public policy around how this, because otherwise people simply won't put money on the table.
And Amanda Rishworth, that's a fair point, isn't it? Because, yes, Labor might jump up and down about these comments from Tony Abbott, but there's no notice of this call being taken from the top. He's been rebuffed by Josh Frydenberg. The PM's not going to put him back into Cabinet. So shouldn't Labor be saying these comments aren't going to go anywhere?
Well, firstly, I think this is a pitch by Tony Abbott to say, put me back in the front bench. And of course, we have seen in the article or articles reporting on this that there are unnamed backbenchers that support him in this. So I think it does firstly go to the fact that there is still significant division within the Liberal Party. But what I would say when it comes to energy policy is I absolutely agree with one point that Tim made, and that is certainty is king. That is why Labor has been calling on the government to have a post-2020 renewable energy target. There is no certainty for investors. What we saw is the talk that Tony Abbott did as Prime Minister around changing the renewable energy target actually led to approximately 3,000 less jobs in the renewable energy sector. We know that business and investors are calling for some long-term certainty past 2020, and that's what we need to see from the government. We also need to see from the government some national leadership when it comes to energy. What we have seen is states are starting to talk about going it alone because we haven't seen any direction from this government. So look, in terms of Tony Abbott's comments, sure, it just highlights once again the division, but it does point to a very important issue here, that is long-term certainty from the government, and we've seen none of that.
But this is where we just get complete rubbish coming out from the opposition. When it comes down to it, they have no connection to reality around how to actually, one, deliver long-term policy certainty, because one of the key considerations of policy certainty is making sure that we get a sensible balance in energy supply and investment in all types of energy, not just renewable energy. And the way the opposition looks at it is that they think that they can just keep putting more and more costs onto households, keep putting them more and more on, and that's somehow going to deliver certainty. It's not. In the end, you'll get backlashes, and this is where, unfortunately, the opposition has been left completely wanting, has no real understanding of how to deliver energy security for Australia.
Hang on.
And that's the tragedy of it, and we've seen this time and time again.
So I'm going to rephrase this as a question from Anna Rishworth. I mean, yes, you've got this target of 50% by 2030, but we don't yet know how that's going to happen, do we? So it's, you know, more like this goal, this theory, this statement, than it is a true policy from Labor.
It's virtue signalling.
Well, firstly, no, let me speak, Tim. You've had a good go now. So, firstly, I'd point out that Tim's point about investment, when there's no certainty around the policy, when there's no certainty past 2020, you don't just see no investment in renewables, you see no investment at all. So, I think that is the first point to make. And without any certainty, without any direction from the government, then what you see is states trying to go it alone. We need some national leadership here, and that is what Labor is offering. We will work with the energy sector, investors, with a range of different players to ensure we meet that target. But as of now, the government has no way to meet its Paris commitments, let alone provide any certainty or leadership to the energy sector, and that is what will drive up prices.
I just want to get
Tom,
one more
that's the
topic
problem
before we go,
when it
Tim
comes
Wilson.
down to it. It's Labor wanting to work with big business, big industry, big unions to try and deliver certainty, but at the cost of households. And that's where they don't understand there's a disconnect between their policy and the theory and the beautiful idea that you can just have this wonderful 50% target versus the practical reality of the cost it's going to impose on households and the backlash that will come as a consequence of it.
You're going to get the last word on that one, Tim Wilson, because I want to tackle one other topic. Donald Trump in Israel, he's already saying he wants to shift the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a fairly provocative move. You know, there's this war of words with China over the one China policy. Are you concerned about the diplomacy or lack thereof before he's even inaugurated?
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
Oh, right. I mean, I think we're all just going to strap in and wait and see what comes out of the Trump presidency. I mean, he's welcome to proffer whatever thoughts he wants, but I think he's got to realise the awe and the significance of the office he is about to go into. And I think this is where a lot of people who are interested in politics understand that when you get elected, you are assuming a position which carries not just stature and power, but that your words have particular meaning. Now, diplomacy isn't about saying flowery things, it's about getting things done. And the question is whether he will rise to that challenge, and I guess we'll only know once he's inaugurated. But at the moment, I would personally be counselling moving away from dialogue through Twitter to dialogue of serious discussion about the future of the country and the world.
Although he said he won't give up Twitter. Amanda Rishworth, we're just about out of time. Your thoughts briefly.
Well, I guess it is the proof will be in the pudding. There will be questions over the impact that he does have and whether or not he is able to deliver, for example, peace in the Middle East as one example, whether he'll strive for that or whether that won't be a priority for him. So I guess in terms of the impact on Australia, we'll just have to wait and see, but we have to make sure that we're working in our own national interests.
Amanda Rishworth, Tim Wilson, thank you. You've got the honour of being the first AIM Agenda guest of 2017.
Thanks, Tom.
Happy New Year.